Tired, pregnant black woman sent her baby bump picture to Korean Mafia by mistake. He said, "I want her now." On a rainy Thursday evening in downtown Seattle, Keisha Williams dragged herself through the revolving doors of her apartment building, one hand pressed against her lower back, the other clutching her phone. At 7 months pregnant and working double shifts as a nurse, every step felt like climbing a mountain. The elevator ride to the 5th floor seemed longer than usual, and all she wanted was to collapse on her couch with her swollen feet elevated. She had no idea that one simple mistake she was about to make, one wrong tap on her phone screen, would connect her to a man halfway across the world, a dangerous man whose single text message would turn her quiet, exhausting life into something she could never have imagined. Before we continue, let us know where you're watching from. And don't forget to subscribe, because we've got more incredible stories coming your way. Keisha pushed open her apartment door and immediately kicked off her shoes. The small one-bedroom apartment was modest, but clean, decorated with thrift store finds and hand-me-down furniture from her late grandmother. Pictures of her family lined the walls, reminding her of better times before everything fell apart. She waddled to the bathroom, splashing cold water on her face before catching her reflection in the mirror. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and her scrubs hung loosely everywhere except around her prominent belly. She was exhausted, broke, and completely alone. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. It was a text from her cousin Shanice asking for an update on the pregnancy. Shanice lived 3 states away in Georgia and had been begging for belly pictures for weeks. Keisha sighed, positioning herself in front of the full-length mirror mounted on her closet door. She lifted her scrub top to reveal her round stomach, angling the phone to get a decent shot. The lighting was terrible, and she looked as tired as she felt, but Shanice would just have to deal with it. She snapped the picture and opened her messages. This is where everything changed. Keisha's fingers moved on autopilot, her exhausted brain not fully engaged. She had been texting back and forth earlier that day with a medical supply vendor about an order for the hospital. The conversation was still open on her phone. Without thinking, without checking, she attached the photo and hit send. Then she shuffled to the kitchen to find something to eat, completely unaware of what she had just done. Across the Pacific Ocean in Seoul, South Korea, Kim Jae-sung sat in his office on the 42nd floor of a gleaming skyscraper. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the glittering city below, but Jae-sung paid no attention to the view. He was focused on the multiple computer screens in front of him, monitoring shipments, tracking accounts, and managing the complex network of legitimate businesses that served as fronts for his actual operations. At 34 years old, he controlled one of the most powerful criminal organizations in Asia, a position he had inherited from his father, and expanded through ruthless intelligence and strategic thinking. Jae-sung did not look like what most people imagined when they thought of a crime boss. He wore expensive tailored suits, kept his hair professionally styled, and conducted himself with the polished manner of a corporate executive. His employees and his legal businesses had no idea about his other life. To them, he was simply a brilliant, demanding CEO who expected perfection. Only his inner circle knew the truth about the empire he really controlled. His phone chimed with an incoming message. It was from an American contact, someone who supplied medical equipment that Jae-sung's organization modified and used for smuggling operations. He opened the message expecting to see documentation about a shipment. Instead, his screen filled with a photograph of a pregnant black woman. Jae-sung stared at his phone, confusion flickering across his normally impassive face. The woman in the photo looked exhausted but beautiful, her protective hand resting on her swollen belly, her eyes downcast. There was something vulnerable and real about the image, so different from the calculated, artificial photos he usually encountered in his world. He zoomed in, studying her face. She looked like she was barely holding herself together, like life had worn her down to the point of breaking. Why would his medical supplier send this? Was this some kind of code? A new method of communication he had not been informed about? Jae-sung prided himself on knowing everything that happened in his organization, and confusion irritated him. He typed a response. Explain this message. Back in Seattle, Keisha had managed to heat up leftover rice and chicken. She was halfway through her meal when her phone buzzed. Assuming it was Shanice responding to the belly picture, she picked it up and felt her stomach drop. The message was not from Shanice. It was from the medical supply vendor, the one she had been texting about work. And somehow, impossibly, she had sent him her pregnancy photo. "Oh no, oh no, oh no," Keisha muttered, her appetite vanishing instantly. Her hands shook as she stared at the screen. This was so unprofessional, so embarrassing. What would he think? She quickly typed an apology. "I am so sorry. That message was meant for my cousin. Please disregard. Very sorry for the confusion." She hit send and dropped her phone on the couch like it had burned her, covering her face with her hands. Of all the stupid mistakes to make, she was already struggling at work, already felt like she was barely hanging on, and now this. What if he complained to her supervisor? What if this somehow affected the hospital's relationship with the vendor? In Seoul, Jae-sung read her response, and understanding dawned. A mistake. A simple, human mistake. He almost smiled, which was rare for him. In his world, mistakes usually meant death or disaster. But this was innocent, harmless. He should have simply acknowledged her apology and moved on. That would have been the logical thing to do. But something made him look at the photo again. The woman's vulnerability struck him. In his life, everyone wore masks. Everyone played angles. Everyone wanted something. But this accidental photo showed someone who was not performing, not manipulating, not scheming. Just a tired, pregnant woman at the end of a long day. It reminded him of something he had almost forgotten existed. Genuine human fragility and honest struggle. Jae-sung's fingers moved across his keyboard. Within minutes, he had pulled up information about the hospital that had been ordering supplies. From there, it was simple to identify who had been handling the communications. Keisha Williams, 29 years old, registered nurse, working in the emergency department. No husband, no partner listed. Living alone in a modest apartment building. Significant credit card debt, student loans, medical bills. He studied her employee photo from the hospital's website. Even in the professional headshot, he could see the strength in her eyes, the determination. This was a woman who had been fighting her whole life. And now, she was pregnant and alone. Still fighting. Jae-sung sat back in his leather chair, his analytical mind processing this information. He had no logical reason to care about this woman. She was nothing to him, just a wrong number, a random accident. But he could not stop looking at that photo. Could not stop thinking about her. In a life filled with violence, manipulation, and cold calculation, this glimpse of genuine vulnerability affected him in a way he did not fully understand. He picked up his phone and typed a message, hesitating before sending it. This was irrational. This was not how he operated. But he sent it anyway. "No need to apologize. I hope you and your baby are healthy." Keisha was trying to relax in a warm bath when her phone buzzed again. She almost did not check it, afraid of what other professional disaster might be waiting. But curiosity won out. She reached for her phone and read the message from the vendor. Her eyebrows rose in surprise. That was unexpectedly kind. Most professional contacts would have either ignored the mistake entirely or sent a curt acknowledgement. This felt almost personal. She typed back, "Thank you. That's very kind. Again, sorry for the confusion." She thought that would be the end of it, that this embarrassing incident would fade into memory. She had no way of knowing that the man on the other end of those messages was not a simple medical equipment vendor, that he was someone whose interest, once captured, did not easily fade. She had no idea that Kim Jae-sung was already making decisions about her, decisions that would pull her into a world she never knew existed. Over the next few days, Jae-sung found himself thinking about Keisha more than he should. He told himself it was idle curiosity, a momentary distraction from his demanding schedule. But he checked her social media profiles, which were sparse and private. He reviewed her financial records, noting every late payment and mounting bill. He even accessed security footage from her apartment building, watching her come home exhausted each evening, always alone. This obsession, because that is what it was becoming, disturbed him. Jae-sung prided himself on control, on keeping emotions separate from business. He had built his empire by being calculating and strategic, not by developing feelings for random strangers. Yet here he was, unable to stop thinking about a woman he had never met, someone who existed in a completely different world from his own. In Seoul, winter had settled in with its characteristic cold and gray skies. Jae-sung attended his usual meetings, oversaw his operations, maintained his various fronts, but part of his mind was always on Seattle, always on Keisha. He told himself he would let it go, that this distraction would fade. It did not. Meanwhile, Keisha's life continued its difficult trajectory. The pregnancy was taking a toll on her body, making the long shifts at the hospital nearly unbearable. Her supervisor had started making comments about her reduced efficiency, barely veiled threats about her position. Money was tighter than ever. Her car made strange noises she could not afford to fix. Her apartment lease was up for renewal with a rent increase she could not afford. The baby's father, Marcus, had disappeared the moment she told him about the pregnancy, blocking her number and moving without leaving a forwarding address. Some nights, after particularly brutal shifts, Keisha would sit in her car in the hospital parking lot and just cry. She was terrified about bringing a baby into this situation, terrified about doing it alone, terrified that she was failing before she even began. But she would dry her tears, drive home, and start again the next day because that was all she knew how to do. Keep fighting. Keep going. 3 weeks after the accidental text message, Keisha received another message from the vendor. She had forgotten all about the incident, her mind occupied with more pressing concerns. "How are you feeling?" the message read. Keisha stared at her phone in confusion. Why would a business contact be asking about her well-being? She typed back cautiously, "I'm fine, thank you." "Is there something you need regarding the hospital order?" The response came quickly. "No business matter, just checking on you and the baby." This was strange, but Keisha was too tired to be alarmed. Maybe the guy was just friendly. Maybe he remembered the embarrassing photo incident and was being nice. She decided to be polite. "That's thoughtful. We're managing. Pregnancy is hard, but we're okay. Are you getting enough rest?" came the next message. Keisha almost laughed at that. Rest? What was rest? She could not remember the last time she had felt truly rested. But she was not going to pour out her problems to a professional contact. "I'm fine," she typed back, then added, "I should go. Have a good evening." She thought that would be the end of the strange conversation, but Jae-sung on the other side of the world sat staring at his phone, recognizing the polite dismissal for what it was. She was not fine. He knew from his surveillance and research exactly how not fine she was. The question was, what was he going to do about it? This was where Jae-sung's careful control began to crack. A rational man would have stopped there, would have recognized that he was crossing lines that should not be crossed. But something about Keisha had awakened a part of him he thought long dead, the part that could still feel protective toward another person, that could still want to help without calculating the return on investment. He made a decision that surprised even himself. He opened a secure line to one of his associates in the United States, a man who handled various tasks for the organization on American soil. "I have a special project," Jae-sung said when the man answered. "There is a woman in Seattle. I want you to help her. Discreetly. Pay off her debts. Fix whatever needs fixing in her life. But she cannot know where it is coming from." There was a pause on the other end. "Boss, I need to understand the parameters here. Who is this woman?" "That is not your concern. I am sending you her information. Make her life easier. Be invisible about it." After he hung up, Jae-sung sat in the darkness of his office, city lights twinkling below. What was he doing? This was not a strategic move. This was not business. This was something else entirely, something dangerous and complicated. But he could not stop himself. Over the next 2 weeks, strange things began happening in Keisha's life. Her credit card company called to say an error had been found in her account, and her balance was significantly lower than she thought. Her car trouble mysteriously resolved itself when a mechanic told her the previous repair had been covered under a warranty she did not remember having. An envelope appeared in her mailbox with cash and a note saying she had won a random drawing from her grocery store loyalty program. Keisha was suspicious at first, then cautiously grateful, then finally just exhausted enough to accept these small miracles without questioning them too deeply. Maybe her luck was finally turning. Maybe things were going to be okay after all. She had no idea that across the ocean, a man she had never met was orchestrating these changes, watching over her through digital surveillance, becoming more invested in her life with each passing day. She had no idea that Kim Jae-sung, one of the most dangerous men in Asia, had become obsessed with protecting her. Jae-sung told himself he would stop after solving her immediate financial crisis. He told himself this was just a temporary fascination that would fade, but it did not fade. Instead, it grew stronger. He found himself checking on her multiple times a day, making sure she got home safely, ensuring she ate properly, monitoring her stress levels through whatever digital means he could access. His second-in-command, a sharp-eyed man named Park Min-ho, finally confronted him about the distraction. "Boss, you have been different lately," Min-ho said carefully during a private meeting. "Is there something I should know about?" Jae-sung considered lying but decided against it. Min-ho had been with him for years and would eventually figure it out anyway. "There is a woman," he said simply. Min-ho's eyebrows rose. "A woman? Here in Seoul?" "America. Seattle. She does not know anything about me, about what I do. It was an accident how we connected." "And you have feelings for this woman?" Jae-sung was silent for a long moment. Did he have feelings? He barely knew Keisha. They had exchanged only a handful of text messages. But he thought about her constantly, cared about her well-being, wanted to protect her. What else could you call that? "Yes," he finally said. "I believe I do." Min-ho looked troubled. "Boss, that is complicated. Our world and a normal civilian, especially someone in America, that is very complicated." "I know. What are you planning to do?" That was the question Jae-sung had been asking himself. What was he planning to do? He could not keep helping her from the shadows forever. Eventually, she would notice the pattern, would start asking questions. And what then? How could he possibly explain who he was, what he did, why he had been watching over her? "I do not know yet," he admitted, "but I cannot seem to stop." Back in Seattle, Keisha was entering her 8th month of pregnancy. The mysterious good fortune that had been following her had eased some of her immediate stress, but new concerns were emerging. She needed to prepare for the baby, needed supplies and furniture, and a plan for maternity leave. Her apartment was too small. She had no support system except for distant relatives who were dealing with their own problems. One evening, after a particularly exhausting shift, she found herself texting the vendor again. She did not know why. Maybe because he had shown kindness before. Maybe because she was so desperately lonely and he was someone who had checked on her. "Do you have kids?" she typed, then almost deleted it before forcing herself to hit send. Jae-sung was in a meeting when his phone buzzed with her message. He excused himself and stepped outside to respond. His heart rate elevated in a way that would have embarrassed him if anyone had known. "No children," he typed back. "Do you have family support for when the baby comes?" "Not really," Keisha admitted, then wondered why she was being so honest with essentially a stranger. Maybe it was the late hour. Maybe it was the hormones. Maybe it was just that she was so tired of pretending everything was fine. "My family is far away and busy with their own lives. The father is not in the picture. It's just going to be me and the baby." Jae-sung felt anger flash through him at the mention of the absent father. What kind of man abandoned a pregnant woman? What kind of coward ran away from his responsibilities? If he ever met this Marcus, there would be consequences. "That is his loss," he typed. "You seem like a strong woman. You will be a good mother." Keisha felt unexpected tears spring to her eyes at those simple words of encouragement. When was the last time someone had said something supportive to her? When was the last time anyone had expressed confidence in her ability to handle what was coming? "Thank you," she typed back. "I'm scared though. Is that okay to admit?" "Of course. Fear means you understand the responsibility. That is good." They continued texting back and forth, a conversation that stretched longer than any they had had before. Keisha found herself opening up in ways she had not expected, talking about her worries, her exhaustion, her hopes for her daughter. Jae-sung, maintaining the fiction that he was simply a medical equipment vendor, listened and offered support, careful not to reveal too much about himself. As the conversation wound down, Keisha typed, "I don't even know your name. I've been calling you the vendor guy in my head." Jae-sung paused. Considering his options, he could continue hiding, could maintain complete anonymity, but something in him wanted her to know at least this small truth about him. My name is Jae-sung, Kim Jae-sung. Korean? Keisha typed back. Yes, I am based in Seoul. Wow, I didn't realize. Your English is perfect. I studied in America for university. I miss it sometimes. Do you ever come back to visit? Jae-sung stared at that question, his mind racing with possibilities he should not be considering. Did he ever come back to America? Not for years. But he could. He could arrange a trip to Seattle, could see her in person instead of through surveillance footage and digital monitoring. The idea was reckless and dangerous, and he knew he was going to do it anyway. Not often, he typed back carefully, but perhaps I should visit soon. It has been too long. They said goodnight, and Keisha finally fell asleep, feeling less alone than she had in months. She had no idea that the kind man she had been texting was already making arrangements to travel halfway around the world to see her. She had no idea that Jae-sung had decided something that night. He wanted her, wanted to be part of her life, wanted to meet his child even though the baby was not biologically his. The logical part of his brain told him this was insane, but the part that had been awakened by her accidental photo would not be silenced. Within 48 hours, Jae-sung had made his plans. He would go to Seattle under the cover of business meetings. He would arrange to meet her, somehow, in a way that did not reveal his surveillance or seem threatening. And then he would see if this connection he felt through a phone screen could exist in the real world. His staff was bewildered by his sudden decision to travel to America, but no one dared question him directly. Min-ho pulled him aside before he left. Boss, please be careful. If this woman finds out who you really are, what you really do, it could be dangerous for both of you. I know, Jae-sung said. And yet you are going anyway. Yes. Min-ho shook his head. This is not like you. You are always so careful, so controlled. Jae-sung smiled slightly. Maybe that is the problem. Maybe I have been too controlled for too long. 3 days later, Kim Jae-sung landed at Seattle-Tacoma International Airport. He had a security detail waiting, a suite reserved at the best hotel in the city, and several legitimate business meetings scheduled to maintain his cover. But none of that mattered. What mattered was that somewhere in this rainy American city was a pregnant woman who had accidentally sent him a photo, and somehow that accident had changed everything. Keisha had no idea that the man from her phone messages was now in the same city, was staying less than 5 miles from her apartment. She had no idea that her life was about to change in ways she could never have imagined. She just kept going to work, kept struggling through her days, kept preparing as best she could for single motherhood. But fate, or perhaps the determination of a powerful man who had decided he wanted something, was about to bring them together. And when that happened, when Keisha finally met Jae-sung face to face, when she learned the truth about who he was and what he wanted, nothing would ever be the same. The collision of their two worlds was inevitable now, and the consequences would be extraordinary. Jae-sung stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows of his hotel suite, watching rain streak down the glass as Seattle's skyline blurred in the gray afternoon light. He had been in the city for 2 days, attending manufactured business meetings that meant nothing to him, all while his real focus remained on a woman who still had no idea he was here. His security team had already mapped out her routines, her routes, her schedule. They knew she worked a 12-hour shift starting at 7 in the morning, that she stopped at the same coffee shop 3 blocks from the hospital, that she took the bus because her car had been acting up again despite the mysterious repair. Min-ho had flown in with him, and the man's disapproval was palpable even when he said nothing. They stood together now, looking out at the city, the silence between them heavy with unspoken concerns. You have been here 2 days and have not approached her, Min-ho finally said. What is your plan, boss? Jae-sung did not answer immediately. What was his plan? He had come all this way driven by an obsession he barely understood. But now that he was here, the reality of the situation felt more complicated. How did you approach a woman you had been secretly helping, secretly watching, without seeming like a stalker? How did you explain that a wrong number text message had led to this moment? I am going to create a natural meeting, he said finally. something that does not frighten her or make her suspicious. And then what? You tell her who you are? What you do? No, not at first. I just want to meet her, talk to her in person, see if what I feel through a phone screen is real. Minho made a sound that might have been a laugh or a groan. This is dangerous, boss. Not just for you, but for her. If your enemies find out about her, if they realize she matters to you, she becomes a target. I know the risks. Do you? Because I am not sure you are thinking clearly about this. Jae-sung turned to face his second-in-command, his expression hardening. I have spent my entire adult life thinking clearly, calculating every move, eliminating every variable. And what has it given me? Power, yes. Money, certainly. But nothing real. Nothing that matters beyond the next deal or the next threat. This woman, she is real. What I feel when I think about her is real. And I am tired of living in a world where nothing is real except violence and strategy. Minho held his gaze for a long moment, then nodded slowly. I understand, boss. But please, be careful. For both your sakes. The next morning, Jae-sung put his plan into motion. He knew Keisha stopped at a coffee shop called Morning Brew before her shift. It was a small place, locally owned, with mismatched furniture and local art on the walls. The kind of place that prided itself on community and regularity. He arrived early, dressed down in jeans and a simple sweater, trying to look like any other customer rather than what he was. His security waited outside in unmarked vehicles, close enough to respond if needed, but far enough to not draw attention. He ordered a coffee and took a seat near the window where he could watch the door. His heart was beating faster than it had in years, faster than it did before dangerous meetings or violent confrontations. This was different. This mattered in a way nothing else had mattered in a long time. At 6:45, Keisha pushed through the door, and Jae-sung felt his breath catch. Seeing her in person was entirely different from photos and surveillance footage. She was beautiful in a way that cameras could not capture, despite the obvious exhaustion in her eyes and the awkward heaviness of her pregnant body. She wore scrubs under a jacket that did not quite close over her belly, and her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. She looked tired and determined and absolutely lovely. He watched as she ordered her usual, a decaf latte and a breakfast sandwich, chatting briefly with the barista who clearly knew her. She was kind to the young man taking her order, patient when he got distracted, and had to ask her to repeat herself. There was a gentleness to her despite whatever hardships she was facing, a core of goodness that shone through the fatigue. Jae-sung knew he should approach her now, should engineer their meeting, but he found himself frozen, suddenly uncertain. What if she rejected him? What if seeing him in person broke whatever fragile connection they had built through text messages? What if he had built up this fantasy in his mind, and the reality would disappoint them both? Keisha collected her order and turned toward the door, and Jae-sung realized his window was closing. He stood abruptly, moving toward the door at the same time she did, and they nearly collided. Her coffee sloshed dangerously in its cup. "Oh, I am so sorry," Jae-sung said, reaching out instinctively to steady her elbow. Keisha looked up at him, and for a moment they just stared at each other. Up close, her eyes were even more striking, deep brown with flecks of gold, currently wide with surprise. She was shorter than he expected, the top of her head barely reaching his shoulder. "No, it's okay. I wasn't watching where I was going," she said, then smiled slightly. "These days I forget how much space I take up." She gestured at her pregnant belly with her free hand, a self-deprecating gesture that made Jae-sung want to tell her she was perfect exactly as she was. Instead, he smiled back, carefully controlling his expression to hide the intensity of what he was feeling. "Are you all right? I did not hurt you or the baby?" "We're fine. Just a little startled. Thanks for asking, though." She started to move past him, and Jae-sung knew this was his moment. If he let her walk out that door, he might not get another chance at a natural meeting. "I am very sorry again. Please, let me buy you another coffee to replace any you spilled." Keisha looked down at her cup, which was still nearly full, then back at him with a slightly confused smile. "I didn't actually spill any, but that's sweet of you to offer. Then perhaps a pastry? Something for the baby?" Now she looked at him more carefully, and Jae-sung could see her trying to figure out if this was a normal, friendly gesture or something else. He kept his expression open and warm, non-threatening. I appreciate it, but I really need to get to work. I'm a nurse and my shift starts soon. Of course I understand. I am sorry for delaying you. He paused, then added, I hope you have a good day at work. Something in his tone made her pause and look at him again. Thanks. You too, whatever you do. She left then, and Jae-sung watched through the window as she hurried down the street toward the bus stop. The encounter had lasted less than 2 minutes, but he felt energized in a way he had not expected. She was even more than he had imagined, and now he wanted more, needed more. Minho's voice crackled in his nearly invisible earpiece. That went well, boss. Very smooth. What now? Now we wait for another opportunity, Jae-sung replied quietly. That opportunity came sooner than expected, but not in a way anyone wanted. 3 days later, Keisha was halfway through a particularly brutal shift in the emergency department when she started feeling pain. At first, she dismissed it as normal pregnancy discomfort, the kind of aches and tightness that had become routine in her 8th month. But as the hours passed, the pain intensified, and she found herself having to stop and breathe through contractions. Girl, you need to sit down, her colleague Denise said, noticing Keisha gripping the nurse's station counter. How long have you been having contractions? I don't know, maybe a couple hours, but it's too early. I'm only 34 weeks. Exactly. Which is why you need to stop being stubborn and let someone check you out. Come on. Denise practically dragged her to an examination room, and within minutes, a doctor confirmed what Keisha had been trying to deny. She was in preterm labor, already dilated 3 centimeters, and the baby was showing signs of distress. They needed to stop the labor if possible, or prepare for an early delivery. If not, Keisha felt panic rise in her throat. But I'm not ready. The baby's room isn't finished. I don't have all the supplies. I was going to have 5 more weeks to prepare. I know, honey, I know, the doctor said gently, but babies have their own timeline. Let's focus on keeping you both healthy right now, and we'll worry about the rest later. They admitted her immediately, starting medications to try to stop the contractions and steroids to help develop the baby's lungs in case they could not stop the labor. Keisha lay in the hospital bed, suddenly a patient in the place where she worked, feeling terrified and alone. She had no one to call, no one who would drop everything and come sit with her. Her family was far away and struggling with their own crises. She had friends from work, but they were busy with their own lives and shifts. She found herself reaching for her phone and opening her messages with Jae-sung. They had been texting more frequently over the past week, casual conversations about nothing important. But his messages had become a bright spot in her difficult days. She hesitated, not wanting to burden him with her problems, but the need to tell someone, anyone, was overwhelming. I'm in the hospital, she typed. Having contractions. They're trying to stop early labor. I'm scared. In his hotel suite across the city, Jae-sung's phone buzzed and he grabbed it instantly. When he read her message, ice flooded his veins, followed immediately by burning urgency. Which hospital? He typed back immediately. Seattle Grace. I work here, but now I'm a patient. Weird how that works. Are you alone? There was a pause before she responded. Yes. It's okay, though. I'm used to handling things on my own. That sentence broke something in Jae-sung. She should not have to be alone, should not have to face something this frightening without support. He was already moving, grabbing his jacket, signaling to Minho. I am coming, he typed. What? No, you don't have to do that. I'll be fine. I am already on my way. Which floor? Jae-sung, seriously, you don't need to come. I barely know you. This is too much to ask. You did not ask. I am choosing to come. Which floor, Keisha? There was a longer pause this time. He could imagine her lying in that hospital bed, alone and scared, trying to decide if she should let a relative stranger into this vulnerable moment. Finally, she responded. 4th floor? Maternity ward. Room 412. But really, you don't have to do this. I will be there in 20 minutes. He turned to Minho, who was already holding out his coat. The hospital. Now. I heard through the earpiece. The car is ready. They made it to Seattle Grace Hospital in 15 minutes. Jae-sung's driver navigating traffic with the kind of aggressive efficiency that came from years of getting the boss where he needed to be quickly. Jae-sung was out of the car before it fully stopped, Minho close behind him. "Boss, wait," Minho said as they entered the hospital. "Think about this. You are about to reveal yourself to her in a very personal situation. Once you cross this line, there is no going back. I know. I do not care. She needs someone, and I am choosing to be that someone." He found the maternity ward easily and made his way to room 412. The door was partially open, and he could see Keisha in the bed, monitors attached to her belly, an IV in her arm. She looked small and frightened, and every protective instinct he had roared to life. He knocked gently on the doorframe. "Keisha?" She turned her head, and her eyes widened in recognition. "Coffee shop guy? What are you... How did you..." Then understanding dawned on her face as the pieces clicked together. The Korean man from the coffee shop. The Korean man she had been texting named Jae-sung. They were the same person. "You're the vendor," she said slowly. "You're Jae-sung from the texts." "Yes." He stepped into the room, keeping his movements slow and non-threatening. "I am sorry I did not tell you I was in Seattle. I was not sure how to explain without seeming strange." "This is pretty strange," she said, but there was no anger in her voice, just confusion and a flicker of something that might have been relief. "Why are you even in Seattle?" "Business meetings," he said, which was technically true even if it was not the whole truth. "But that does not matter right now. How are you? What are the doctors saying?" As if his presence had given her permission to stop being strong, Keisha's face crumpled and tears started flowing. "They're trying to stop the labor, but they don't know if it's going to work. If the baby comes now, she'll be premature. She might have problems, and I'm not ready. I don't have everything she needs. I don't have anyone to help me." Jae-sung moved to her bedside without thinking, taking her hand in his. It was the first time he had touched her beyond that brief moment in the coffee shop, and the contact sent electricity through him. "You are not alone anymore," he said firmly. "I am here, and I will help you with whatever you need." "But why? You barely know me. We've just been texting for a few weeks." "Sometimes you just know when something is important," he said, looking directly into her eyes. "You are important, Keisha. You and your baby are important. I cannot explain it better than that, but I am here and I am not leaving unless you tell me to go." She stared at him for a long moment, tears still streaming down her face. Later, she would question this decision, would wonder why she trusted him so quickly. But in that moment, exhausted and frightened and desperately lonely, she made a choice. "Please stay," she whispered. And so he did. Jae-sung pulled a chair close to her bedside and sat down, still holding her hand. He stayed through the evening as the medication slowly took effect and the contractions began to space out. He stayed through the night as she dozed fitfully between monitoring checks. He stayed the next morning when the doctor came in with good news. The labor had stopped, and they were going to keep her for observation, but the baby was safe for now. Minho brought him changes of clothes and food, shaking his head at the situation but saying nothing. The security team maintained their perimeter, invisible but vigilant, and Jae-sung sat by Keisha's bed, sometimes talking quietly with her, sometimes just sitting in comfortable silence, occasionally stepping out to let her rest or to handle urgent business calls. The nurses noticed, of course. A handsome, attentive man sitting vigil by the bedside of a patient who everyone knew had no support system was notable. Denise cornered Keisha when Jae-sung went to get coffee. "Girl, who is that man, and where did you find him? Because he has barely left your side for 18 hours. Keisha did not know how to answer that question. Who was Jae-sung? A vendor she had accidentally texted? A kind stranger who showed up at the coffee shop? Someone who somehow made her feel safe despite all logic, saying she should be more cautious? "It's complicated," she finally said. "Complicated or not, that man is looking at you like you hung the moon. Just be careful, okay? Make sure you know who he really is before you get in too deep." Denise's warning echoed in Keisha's mind after her friend left. She really did not know anything about Jae-sung beyond surface details. What did he actually do for work? Why was he really in Seattle? What did he want from her? But every time she looked at him, saw the genuine concern in his eyes, felt the strength of his presence, her doubts quieted. On the second day of her hospital stay, with her condition stabilized and the baby no longer in immediate danger, Jae-sung finally broached the subject that had been on his mind. Keisha, I want to help you prepare for the baby. Let me take care of the things you need. I can't let you do that, she protested automatically. You've already done so much just by being here. I can't accept money or gifts from you. Why not? Because I don't know what you want in return. Nothing is free. I learned that a long time ago. Jae-sung was quiet for a moment, considering how to respond. He wanted to tell her he wanted nothing except to be part of her life, to help raise her daughter, to build something real with her. But it was too soon, too intense. She would run if he revealed the depth of his feelings. What if I want friendship? He said instead. What if I am tired of business relationships and strategic alliances and want to know someone genuine? You sent me a photo by accident, and it made me remember that there are real people in the world with real struggles. Let me help because it makes me feel human again. Is that so difficult to accept? Keisha studied his face, trying to read the truth in his expression. There was something he was not telling her. She could sense that much. But she also sensed that he was being honest about wanting to help. About wanting connection. Okay, she said slowly, but within reason. I'm not comfortable with extravagant gifts or anything that makes me feel bought. Reasonable help only, he agreed. Though his definition of reasonable was probably very different from hers. They released her from the hospital the next day with strict instructions for bed rest and reduced activity. Jae-sung insisted on driving her home, and she was too tired to argue. When they pulled up to her modest apartment building in his sleek black car, she saw him take in the surroundings with an unreadable expression. This is me, she said, suddenly embarrassed by the shabby exterior, the broken security gate, the graffiti on the walls. She had never been ashamed of where she lived before, but seeing it through his eyes made her aware of how it must look to someone who clearly had money. Let me help you inside, was all he said, coming around to open her door and offering his arm for support. Her apartment looked worse than the outside. The furniture was old and worn, the appliances outdated, the space too small for her current needs, let alone adding a baby. The nursery she had been trying to set up was just a corner of her bedroom with a second-hand crib she had not finished assembling. Jae-sung took it all in, silently, his mind already cataloging everything that needed to be improved or replaced. But he kept his expression neutral, not wanting to make her feel worse. Thank you for the ride, Keisha said, hovering near the door, in a way that suggested she expected him to leave now. I want to finish assembling the crib before I go, he said. And check that you have food and anything else you might need since you are supposed to be resting. Jae-sung, I can handle it. I know you can, but you do not have to. He met her eyes steadily. Please. Let me do this small thing. She finally nodded, too exhausted to keep protesting. She sank onto her worn couch while he explored her tiny kitchen, making a list on his phone of everything she needed. Then he tackled the crib assembly, his efficient movements speaking of someone used to solving problems with his hands despite his obvious wealth. Keisha watched him work, this strange man who had entered her life through a mistake and was now in her apartment putting together her baby's crib. Nothing about this made sense, and yet somehow it felt right in a way she could not explain. Why are you really doing this? She asked quietly. And please don't tell me it's just to feel human. There's more to it than that. Jae-sung paused, tightening a bolt on the crib, considering his answer carefully. I saw your photo, the one you sent by accident, and I saw something real. In my world, everything is calculated and artificial. But you were just a tired pregnant woman at the end of a long day, unguarded and genuine. It affected me more than I expected. And then when we started talking, I found myself thinking about you, wondering if you were okay, wanting to make things easier for you. Is that so strange? Yes, Keisha said bluntly. That's very strange. Normal people don't become this invested in strangers. He smiled slightly. Perhaps I am not normal people. Clearly. He finished the crib and stood back to examine his work. There, safe and ready for your daughter. What else needs to be done? Nothing tonight. You should go back to your hotel. You must have actual work to do, actual business to handle. Jae-sung checked his watch and realized it was nearly 8 in the evening. He had been away from his obligations for almost 3 full days, letting Min-ho handle everything in his absence. That was unprecedented. And if his organization's enemies knew about this distraction, they might try to exploit it. "I will go," he agreed reluctantly. "But I am giving you my personal number, the one I actually answer all the time. If you need anything, at any hour, you call me. Promise me." "Jae-sung, you can't just drop everything every time I have a problem. Promise me anyway." Something in his tone, commanding but also almost pleading, made her nod. "Okay, I promise." He left then, and Keisha found herself feeling the absence of his presence like a physical thing. Her apartment seemed emptier and quieter than before. She looked at the assembled crib, at the groceries he had arranged on her counter, at the phone number he had programmed into her contacts with his name, and a small heart emoji that made her smile despite herself. What was she getting into? Who was this man, really? And why did the thought of seeing him again make her heart beat faster despite all her reasonable doubts? Outside in his car, Jae-sung leaned his head back against the seat and closed his eyes. Min-ho turned from the front passenger seat. "Well, you are in deep now, boss. No turning back." "I know. She seems like a good woman, but she is going to have questions eventually. Questions about who you really are and what you really do. What will you tell her?" "I do not know yet, but I cannot walk away now." "No," Min-ho agreed. "I do not think you can." They drove back to the hotel through rainy Seattle streets, and Jae-sung stared out the window thinking about Keisha alone in that small apartment, about the baby coming in a few weeks, about the life he wanted to build with them. He was one of the most powerful criminals in Asia, and she was a struggling nurse living paycheck to paycheck. Their worlds should never have collided, but they had through one accidental photo, and now Jae-sung was determined to make it work no matter what obstacles stood in their way. He had always been good at overcoming obstacles. The question was, what would happen when Keisha discovered the truth about him? Would she run? Would she be horrified? Would she want nothing to do with him once she knew about the violence and criminality that defined his real life? Those were questions for another day. For now, he had to figure out how to be present in her life without revealing too much too soon, how to help her without overwhelming her, how to build trust while keeping dangerous secrets. It was the most challenging operation he had ever undertaken, and the stakes were higher than any criminal enterprise. Because this time, what he stood to lose was not money or power or territory. This time, he stood to lose something that actually mattered, the possibility of love and family, and a life that meant more than survival and dominance. He stood to lose Keisha and her daughter before he ever really had them, and that was a risk that terrified him more than any enemy ever had. Over the following weeks, Jae-sung became a constant presence in Keisha's life, though he was careful to maintain boundaries that would not overwhelm her. He extended his stay in Seattle indefinitely, citing ongoing business opportunities that required his attention. Min-ho managed the organization's operations remotely, flying back to Seoul twice to handle matters that required the boss's direct authority, but always returning to Seattle, where Jae-sung remained focused on Keisha. The gifts started small. A grocery delivery that Keisha assumed was a mistake until she found a note saying it was from him. A baby monitor system that appeared on her doorstep, prenatal vitamins and pregnancy support pillows. Each time she protested, he would remind her of their agreement about reasonable help, and somehow his definition of reasonable kept expanding while she was too tired and grateful to fight it properly. They fell into a routine. He would visit her apartment several times a week, always calling first, always respectful of her space. Sometimes he brought food and they would eat together while watching television. Other times, he would simply sit with her while she rested, working quietly on his laptop while she dozed on the couch. He assembled furniture, installed a new security system she did not question too closely, and somehow arranged for her landlord to withdraw the rent increase she had been dreading. Keisha's coworkers noticed the changes in her. She seemed less stressed, less exhausted, more hopeful about the future. Denise remained skeptical of Jae-sung's intentions, but even she had to admit that whatever he was doing, it was helping Keisha in tangible ways. "I still think you need to ask him more questions," Denise said one day when they were both on break. Like, what does he actually do for work? Why is he still in Seattle after all these weeks? What does he want long term? I know I should ask, Keisha admitted, but I'm afraid of the answers. What if he's involved in something illegal? What if he's married? What if learning the truth means losing the help and support I desperately need right now? Girl, you can't build something real on avoiding the truth. Keisha knew Denise was right, but she was not ready yet. She was too comfortable in the fantasy that this handsome, wealthy man genuinely cared about her for no ulterior motive, that he wanted nothing except to help her and be in her life. Reality could wait a little longer. But reality had its own timeline, and it came crashing in on a rainy Tuesday evening when Keisha was 37 weeks pregnant. She was at home, following her doctor's orders for bed rest, when she heard loud voices outside her apartment door, then shouting, then a crash that made her jump and grab for her phone. Before she could dial, her door burst open and 3 men rushed in. They were Asian, dressed in expensive suits, and they moved with the kind of purposeful violence that made Keisha's blood run cold. One of them grabbed her roughly by the arm, yanking her up from the couch. "Where is Kim Jae-sung?" the man demanded in accented English. "We know he has been coming here. Where is he?" "I don't know what you're talking about," Keisha gasped, trying to pull away. "Let go of me. I'm pregnant." "We know about the baby," another man said, his smile cold. "That is why you are valuable. Kim Jae-sung has become very attached to you. You will bring him to us." Keisha's mind raced with confusion and terror. Why were these men looking for Jae-sung? Why did they know about her? What had she gotten herself into? The man holding her pulled out a phone and started recording a video. "Tell Kim Jae-sung to come to the old warehouse on Harbor Avenue in 1 hour. Come alone or the pregnant woman dies. He will know who sent this message." Before Keisha could say anything, before she could even process what was happening, the apartment door burst open again, and everything exploded into violence. Jae-sung entered like a force of nature, Min-ho and 2 other men behind him. The fight was brief and brutal. Jae-sung moved with a speed and efficiency that spoke of extensive training and experience with violence. Within seconds, 2 of the intruders were on the ground, and the third was being held by Min-ho with a gun to his head. Jae-sung went immediately to Keisha, his hands running over her arms, checking for injuries. "Are you hurt? Did they hurt you or the baby?" Keisha could not speak. She just stared at him, at the blood on his knuckles, at the cold rage in his eyes that slowly softened as he looked at her. This was not the gentle man who assembled her baby furniture. This was someone else entirely, someone dangerous and violent and terrifying. "Keisha, answer me. Are you injured?" She shook her head mutely, still in shock. Jae-sung pulled her against his chest, one hand protectively cradling her belly, and spoke rapidly in Korean to Min-ho. The man being held nodded frantically, clearly answering questions, and then Min-ho and the others dragged all 3 intruders out of the apartment. Suddenly, it was just Keisha and Jae-sung, standing in her destroyed living room, the echo of violence still hanging in the air. She pulled away from him, backing up until she hit the wall. What was that? Who were those men? Who are you really? Jae-sung's expression was anguished. This was the moment he had been dreading, the moment when she learned the truth and everything fell apart. But there was no more hiding, no more carefully constructed fiction. "My name is Kim Jae-sung. That part is true. But I am not just a medical equipment vendor. I run a large organization in South Korea. Some of what we do is legitimate business. Much of it is not. I am what you would call a crime boss, head of one of the most powerful organizations in Asia." Keisha felt her legs weaken, and she slid down the wall to sit on the floor. "A crime boss. You're a criminal." "Yes. And those men? They were your enemies. Rivals from a competing organization. They must have been watching me, tracking my movements. When they realized I was spending time with you, they saw an opportunity to hurt me by threatening you. So, I'm in danger now because of you. My baby is in danger because of you." Her voice was rising, panic and anger mixing together. "How could you do this to me? How could you come into my life knowing you would put me at risk? I thought I could protect you. I have security watching this building, watching you whenever you leave. But they got past my people. And for that, I am sorry. I am so sorry, Keisha." She laughed, but it was a bitter, broken sound. You're sorry. My apartment door is destroyed. Strange men broke in and threatened to kill me, and you're sorry. What else haven't you told me? What other lies have you been living? Everything I have felt for you is real, Jae-sung said, moving closer but not touching her. Everything I have said about caring for you and wanting to be part of your life, that is all true. The circumstances of how we met, the accident that connected us, I believe that happened for a reason. Don't, Keisha said sharply. Don't romanticize this. You've been lying to me for weeks. You've been putting me in danger while pretending to help me. Those men were going to use me to hurt you, maybe kill me and my baby in the process. And you knew this could happen, but you kept coming around anyway. You are right. I was selfish. I wanted you in my life, and I convinced myself I could keep you safe while having what I wanted. That was wrong. They sat in silence for a long moment, Keisha on the floor with her back against the wall. Jae-sung crouched a few feet away, both of them processing the ruins of whatever they had been building together. I need you to leave, Keisha finally said quietly. I need you to leave and never come back. Whatever this was between us, it's over. I can't have this kind of danger around my daughter. I understand, Jae-sung said, though each word felt like a knife in his chest. But please, let me move you somewhere safe first. Those men work for the Tanaka clan. They will not stop just because I am no longer seeing you. They know about you now, and that makes you a permanent target unless I resolve the situation. Resolve it how? By killing them? Jae-sung did not answer, which was answer enough. Keisha closed her eyes, feeling tears slip down her cheeks. I don't want any of this. I just wanted to have my baby and figure out how to be a single mother, and maybe not be so alone all the time. That's all I wanted. I know, and I ruined that for you. But please, Keisha, let me fix this. Let me make sure you and your daughter are safe before I walk away. What choice did she have? She was 7 months pregnant, exhausted, and now aware that dangerous criminals knew where she lived and saw her as a target. Pride and anger wanted to tell him to leave and never speak to her again, but survival instinct and concern for her baby won out. Fine, but after you fix this, after you make sure we're safe, you disappear from our lives. Completely. Forever. If that is what you want, then yes, I will disappear. Within hours, Keisha found herself in a luxury apartment in a secure building downtown, one that had been arranged so quickly she suspected Jae-sung already owned it. Minho and a team of security guards were stationed discreetly throughout the building. Her belongings had been moved, her job had been contacted to arrange extended leave, and everything she might need had been provided. Jae-sung visited once more before leaving to handle the situation with the Tanaka clan. He stood in the doorway of her new temporary home, looking at her with such pain and longing that she almost weakened. I meant what I said, he told her. Everything I feel for you is real. I know I have no right to ask anything of you after what I have done, but please believe that my feelings were never a lie. It doesn't matter if your feelings were real, Keisha said, forcing herself to stay strong even though part of her wanted to run to him. Your life is too dangerous. I can't raise my daughter in a world where men break into our home with guns. I can't love someone who solves problems with violence. I just can't. I understand. Goodbye, Keisha. He left, and Keisha collapsed on the expensive couch in her new temporary apartment, sobbing for everything that had happened, for the loss of what might have been, for the loneliness that felt even more crushing now that she had briefly tasted what it felt like to not be alone. 3 days later, the Tanaka clan's operations in Seattle were dismantled overnight. The men who had threatened Keisha were never seen again. Jae-sung had kept his word about resolving the situation, though Keisha tried not to think too hard about what that resolution had entailed. Minho came to check on her regularly, always respectful, always professional. She asked him once if Jae-sung was still in Seattle. He returned to Seoul 2 days ago, Minho said. He wanted me to tell you that you can stay in this apartment as long as you need. It is yours, fully paid for. The security will remain in place until you feel safe enough to leave or until you tell us to go. I don't want his money or his apartment. He knows, but he also knows you need somewhere safe to have your baby. Please, just use what he is offering until you are ready to move on. Think of it as his way of apologizing for the danger he brought into your life. Keisha wanted to refuse, wanted to reject everything connected to Jae-sung, but she was practical enough to recognize that she needed this help, at least temporarily. She nodded reluctantly. 2 weeks later, at 39 weeks pregnant, Keisha went into labor. This time, it was not false labor or a medical emergency. This was the real thing, and she was ready. Denise drove her to the hospital and stayed with her through the early stages, but had to leave for her own shift. Keisha labored alone, refusing to let herself wish that Jae-sung was there holding her hand. At 3:17 in the morning, she gave birth to a healthy baby girl weighing 7 pounds 4 ounces. The moment they placed her daughter in her arms, Keisha fell completely in love. Nothing else mattered in that moment. Not Jae-sung, not the danger he had brought into her life, not the complicated feelings she still had despite everything. Just this perfect, tiny human who depended entirely on her. "Hi, baby girl," she whispered. "I'm your mama, and I'm going to take such good care of you, I promise." She named her daughter Maya, after her grandmother. Maya had her mother's eyes and a surprisingly full head of dark hair. She was perfect and beautiful, and Keisha felt her heart expand with a fierce, protective love she had never experienced before. Minho visited the hospital the next day with an enormous flower arrangement and a small gift box. Inside the box was a delicate gold bracelet sized for a baby, with tiny charms of a moon and a star. "From Jae-sung," Minho explained. "He wanted me to congratulate you and to tell you that he wishes you both every happiness." Keisha looked at the bracelet, blinking back tears. "Is he still in Seoul?" "Yes, and he will stay there unless you tell him otherwise. He respects your wishes, Miss Williams." After Minho left, Keisha sat alone with Maya, sleeping in her arms, looking at the bracelet and thinking about everything that had happened. Jae-sung had been wrong to lie to her, wrong to involve her in his dangerous world. But he had also been there for her when she had no one, had shown her kindness when she desperately needed it, had cared about her and her baby in a way that felt genuine despite the lies. She did not know if she could ever forgive him, or if it was even safe to try. But as she fastened the delicate bracelet around Maya's tiny wrist, she allowed herself to acknowledge what she had been trying to deny. She had fallen in love with him too, despite everything. Despite the danger and the lies and the impossibility of it all. Maybe someday, when Maya was older and the danger had passed, maybe then she could reach out to him. Maybe they could find a way to build something real, without the lies. Or maybe this was how their story ended, with an accidental photo that led to a brief, intense connection that burned bright and then faded into memory. Only time would tell. For now, Keisha had everything she needed right here in her arms. Her daughter, healthy and perfect, depending on her for everything. That would be enough. It had to be enough. But as Maya slept peacefully, the tiny bracelet glinting in the hospital room's soft light, Keisha could not help but wonder if somewhere across the ocean, a dangerous man was thinking about them, hoping they were safe, wishing he could be part of the family he had helped bring together, even if only from a distance. The answer was yes. In Seoul, Kim Jae-sung sat in his office, looking at a photo on his phone. It was the original accidental photo Keisha had sent him, the one that had started everything. He had not deleted it. He looked at it every day, remembering the moment he first saw her face, the moment that changed his entire life, even if she never fully understood how much. Minho had sent him photos of Maya. The baby was beautiful, perfect. And Jae-sung felt an ache in his chest, knowing he would never hold her, never be the father figure he had briefly imagined becoming. But Keisha and Maya were safe, and that was what mattered most. He would watch over them from afar, ensuring no danger ever touched them again. He would provide for them through anonymous channels, making sure Maya had every opportunity in life. And he would wait, hoping that someday Keisha might decide that a dangerous man who loved her could be trusted again. It was not the ending he wanted, but it was the ending she needed. And for the first time in his life, Kim Jae-sung put someone else's needs above his own desires. Because that was what love meant, even if she never knew how deeply he loved her. Their story was not over, just paused, waiting to see what the future would bring.